We have a special guest here tonight to make the proper introduction. So I am going to hand the microphone over to the senior senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren.
Thank you very much. Hello? Fabulous. Okay. All right, I have to use the Mac. Better? Okay, that's fine. You can always tell a school teacher, right? I want to make sure I'm being heard in the back row because I am keeping an eye on the back row. I know why you are in the back row. So you will be called on before this is over. All right. So I'm here tonight just to give the liftoff to a remarkable book that has been written by a remarkable woman. And that's kind of says the whole thing, but you know me, I'm going to talk a little longer than that. I thought about why I love this book so much, and I had 3 reasons for loving this book. The first is that this book is written with a moral compass. And in a time that is so difficult in our country, we need that moral compass. We need to hear it, we need to feel it, and no one has a stronger, louder voice on this than Rosa DeLauro and her book. This is also a book that is enormously optimistic to read. The book is actually thrilling, and it is thrilling because it tells about fights. It tells about getting in fights, and it tells about winning fights. And boy, do we need the examples of when to win fights. No one better stands for the proposition that you can't win if you don't get in the fight than Rosa. And this book is proof after proof after proof of that. You make change when you fight. But the third part of the book is the part that I like to think was actually unintentional on Rosa's part. And that's the part where you get all the glimpses of Rosa. Because Rosa tries to make this book about the fights. She tries to make this book about the moral compass, about the people who are affected, about why we're here. But truly, this book gives glimpses of Rosa that are truly, truly delightful to taste. So I want to make this point. I like this book so much. I read it all the way, not just to the end. I actually read the acknowledgments. Like, what could you ask for that is more commitment to a book than I sat here and was even reading the extra stuff that they put in at the end. So I'm reading the acknowledgments, and the acknowledgments go on forever, partly because I meant forever in a good way. But they do. Lots and lots of acknowledgments because Rosa is a very generous-hearted person, and partly because she's worked with a whole lot of people through the years. So I'm kind of reading through them, and I'm reading all these acknowledgments, thinking, oh, I know that person. And I'm thinking, who's that? You know, as you kind of go through it, measuring against it. And then I came to this one. So this is from Rosa's book. She'll do her own reading, but I had to do my little reading here. And she says, I also want to thank Archbishop John Francis Whalen. And I thought, oh, that's so nice. And I thought what would follow would be something about for his spiritual guidance, for how he helped me in times, right? That's what you would expect, is the next sentence. But the story takes a quick turn at that point, because the next sentence says, he demanded that Laurelton Hall, my high school alma mater, remove me from their board of directors because of my views on abortion, or be decertified as a Catholic institution. Whoa, this guy plays rough, right? So I thought, and this is a thank you. Good, Rosa. And then that's where you get the glimpse of who Rosa DeLauro is. She explains quite calmly, I resigned and penned a detailed unapologetic letter of resignation. It clarified my thinking about my Catholic faith and what the priorities of my church should be. That's our Rosa DeLauro. Come on up here, Rosa, and tell them about your book. Who could ask for more? Woo!
Friends, if you're going to be in a fight, you want to be in that fight with Elizabeth Warren. Wow, God, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Wow, I don't know. I think this room is really very humbling. I mean that very, very sincerely. You are wonderful to be here tonight, and I couldn't thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank all of you for being here. And I just say that Elizabeth Warren, who in a nanosecond, when I said, would you be willing to introduce me? She said, I would love to do nothing better, rearranged her schedule to be able to do this tonight. So you are the best friend and the best ally in that fight for the vulnerable. I have to say, though, that, let me just tell you, that Elizabeth and I forged a bond over many, many years. And, you know, like most Americans, I became aware of Elizabeth Warren more than a decade ago when I read her book, which was a breakthrough book, and that's The Two-Income Trap, and where she described the middle-class families who are working so hard, people who played by the rules, and they were struggling every single day to pay the bills. And come on, Julia, let's go, Lois, for God's sakes. Come on. Anyway, you got to see. That's great. I'll talk about my colleagues in a second. But not long after that, through Barney Frank and through something called the Tobin Project with Harvard, I got to sit at a meeting with Elizabeth, and we were talking at that meeting about the intersection of public policy and academia and how we could benefit from one another. And that is a divide, by the way, that Elizabeth has bridged. I then invited her. Some of you have been to the public policy dinners at my home. I invited her to come to meet with members of Congress to talk about that middle-class struggle that she wrote so eloquently about. And you know what? She wound up doing 4 public policy dinners over and over and over again. And the rest for her is history. But let me just tell you that no one understands better the House of Cards financial system than Elizabeth. And she talked about how people were going to be put at risk, and she talked about those who were going to suffer. And years before the financial crash, she talked about that storm that was brewing out there. In my living room at 816 East Capitol Street, she told us about the collapse of the financial institutions, and she said that people were going to pay a high price and that people were going to suffer. It was prescient. And unfortunately, it came true in the most horrendous way for people. She talked that night about something called the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Do we know what that is? Yes, we do. And, you know, I wanted her to head that up. And I was lobbying for her to head that up. But you know what, friends? I am so damn glad that she is not heading it up and that she is where she is right now, because we need her to make that fight for all of us. And, you know, I feel so close to Elizabeth Warren. She comes from a working class home. She comes from a home that struggled literally to put food on the table. She knows what it means. And that helped to shape her view of America. She understands that struggle. Fearless in fighting the banks, fearless in fighting corporations that put us all at risk. And you might know she has not only said about it, that she's written about it. This fight is our fight. That's her book. You got to go out and get it. And it really is so understanding of the struggle. That's right. Hold it up. Hold it up. Someone's got the book here, Elizabeth. And you know, it's on the bestseller list. It's #1 on the bestseller list. So it really is great. We have been in tough fights together. And as I said, I wouldn't want to be with anyone else because she is fearless. She speaks her mind and she speaks the truth. And it is a wonderful, wonderful friendship. You know, you meet a lot of folks in Washington. You have a lot of acquaintances, but you can only count the friends you have. Probably on one hand, Elizabeth Warren is my friend. I love you, my sister. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Thank you for doing this tonight. I also, if I just take a second, a number of my colleagues have come into the room, and I can't name them all because I would miss somebody, and that would be terrible. But you know, we serve in an amazing institution, and we have been blessed with the honor of serving in the United States Congress. That is such an honor for me to be there, but for me to be able to serve with all of you, people who every day struggle and lead the fight for the vulnerable in this country. I would love to have you give a round of applause to my congressional colleagues who are here. There's Nita, there's Julie, there's Paul, there's Lois, there's David Price, everything. Unbelievable. Jan Schakowsky, who is back there. You see, I knew I would miss someone, but thank you so much for... Pardon? Where's Mark? Pocan. All right, great. Let me begin. The book begins with my family, and I want to say thank you to my parents and my 103-year-old mother. Was at the book launch in New Haven last week. Tough lady. To my husband, Stan Greenberg, who is here. He is my pal, but you know, he was for NAFTA. I was against, and I was right. But he has indeed been a rock from the very first, encouraging me to new heights and to new opportunities. Hey, guys, how are you? Good to see you, Avery. Okay, all right. And, you know, he said to me, go to work for Chris Dodd in Washington, D.C., run for the Congress, write a book. The success of all these efforts includes the two of us. And in many ways, as so many of you can understand, there really is no way to say thank you. But thank you, Dr. Greenberg. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Let me acknowledge my children. There's Catherine Greenberg is right there, along with Ari Zentner, her husband. Anna Greenberg and Dana Milbank and her husband. Jonathan Greenberg and Justine Gardner are in New York with their new baby Gus, our latest grandchild. But they have always been, including when I first ran 26 years ago, running to the radio station when I was being attacked and telling them that I was a good person, that their stepmom was a great person. And I think they sang on that show as well. They were wonderful. But they are the best cheering squad and have been for almost 40 years. And to the lights of my life, to my 6 grandchildren, to Rigby Maya, who is where you are over there. Thank you to, where is Sadie Liberty? Okay. Noah is out there, and Catherine, and Teo, Isaac, where are you, Teo? Okay. And Jasper Samuel, right there, who lost his front teeth. And baby Gus, who is our newest. But they are truly the lights of our lives. So I thank all of you, and I will get to the book, but I also wanted you to know, and this is not self-serving in any way, but the royalties from this book are going to go to two agencies that are so important in my life, and one is the Connecticut Food Bank, because they're feeding people today, people who are hungry in this country, and the Clifford Beers Clinic, which provides mental health services for children who've been exposed to violence and to trauma. So that's what we're going to do. But, you know, people have asked me, okay, DeLauro, why did you write the book? You know, I guess it's a standard question. But I believe so deeply, and I know people in this room believe so deeply in the social safety net, and that it is a reflection of our values. It is about shared responsibility that we have in our lifetimes. It is about a moral responsibility for people in a time of need. This is what I learned growing up at my kitchen table from my parents. And today, you all know that the social safety net is under a massive assault by Donald Trump and by Paul Ryan. I took the lessons from that kitchen table from my folks and to Washington. And when I arrived there, it was about what I learned was for 40 years, we had established a social safety net in this nation, something that was crafted by Democrats and, yes, by Republicans as well, who came together and they said that people in need the help of the government and government working for people. And that is why the social safety net was created. It was about Social Security. It was about putting food on the table for people, having folks retire with some dignity in their lives. And, you know, Elizabeth talked about the fights, and this book does lay out the fights, but it's not the fights for no reason. It's fights we have had in the past, and it's fights that we have won because we've mobilized people all over this country, and we can do this again. We can fight back, and we can win. And what I want to remind people is about the value of the social safety net, about what it's done in lifting millions of people out of poverty in this country. And more than that, I want to activate and mobilize people to attack what Trump and Ryan are trying to do to all of us. So I want to just, at the heart of the book, if I can, this is the way I start, okay? You know, I sit on the Appropriations Committee, okay? You ready for this? So every time, I mean, when we have a markup about a bill, hi, Debbie. Hi, sweetheart, how are you? When we go to that, I tab everything because it's the way I know what amendments are coming up and what's going to happen. So I approach this in the same way as I was going to a committee markup. So there we are. But let me just read this to you briefly. It bears repeating that corporations do not feel free to poison us, sell us spoiled meat, lock our daughters up in 9th-floor sweatshops with no fire escapes, employ our underage sons in coal mines, force us to work 13-hour shifts without overtime or a break, or call in private armies to fire rifles at those of us who dare strike for higher wages. It's not because corporations experienced a moment of zen and decided to evolve. No, they were forced into greater accountability and social concern by the legitimate actions of a democratic government. In other words, if we depend on goodwill, we are all screwed. Growing up in New Haven, Connecticut, I saw ample evidence all around me of just how vulnerable hardworking people are in the face of corporate indifference. In 1957, when I was barely a teenager, the Franklin Street fire claimed the life of my friend's mother. 15 people died in that fire because they couldn't escape the smoke and the flames. A fire escape was locked, and the ladder would not extend to the ground. There had been no fire drills, no doors opened doors opened the wrong way, blocking exits. It was a disaster, and it happened just down the street from my house. It is impossible to be an eyewitness to events like that and not be touched by the gravity of our responsibilities to one another. The sense of responsibility, as I've talked about tonight, is rooted in my family. I'm often asked by the press, Congresswoman DeLauro, what motivates you? What makes you vote the way you do? What are the issues that you take up? And my response is always not the 26 years that I have spent in the House of Representatives, but growing up in an Italian and a Catholic household. And if I can, bear with me. I announced, and the kids were all with me when I announced for Congress in Worcester Square, around the corner from where I was born. I evoked my grandmother's pastry shop and how both my father and mother, Ted and Louisa DeLauro, worked in tough jobs before serving on New Haven's Board of Aldermen, where they devoted themselves to helping people, families, and neighborhoods. My folks did not develop policies or write legislation, but they made government work for people who were struggling. Their brand of politics was about helping people make their way through the system. For them, elected office was about making use of government to create opportunity, helping out folks from the neighborhood if their sons or daughters got into trouble or were arrested, because everyone deserved a second chance. Or helping their kids get a first job for the city or public works. Neighbors came to our house to discuss all manner of problems. While Louisa served coffee and baked cream puffs, our kitchen table was my parents' office, and nobody gave a second thought to dropping by. And always in my head, thinking about my mother's admonition, she said to me, never take no for an answer. And you have to know her, she's dynamite. She also admonished girls in 1933 in a Democratic newsletter, and when she said, come on, girls, let's make our voices heard. So I hear her voice at every step, and she taught me never to take no for an answer. You know, what is? By the way, still today, I said she's 103 years old. If I say I'm leaving Mom, okay, she'll look at me and she says, are you going out like that? So, I mean, it's, you know, she doesn't change. Anyway, what is that safety net? It's making sure that people get a break. You know, particularly when they're having a difficult time. You know, technically we know this. It's an array of government programs that help people who are working and helping people if they're out of work and helping them in times of need. And it's making sure that kids are not punished just because they're growing up in a poor household. That shouldn't be. They shouldn't be held accountable for that. But, you know, that's technically what it is. But morally, it is more than programs. It really is being accountable for one another. You all know in this room, you're students of this city and of politics. It's Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, the Earned Income Tax Credit, child tax credits, income support programs, food stamps, nutrition programs, unemployment insurance, minimum wage. Hopefully someday, the Affordable Care Act and affordable health care will be part of that social safety net. You know? And as I said to you, this was pioneered by Democrats and by Republicans. And in the book I write, these laws were not written by naive people. Our social safety net programs acknowledged that progress was making us on the whole richer, more powerful, but that it also led to incredible uncertainty and to volatility. The designers of our social and human safety net realized that safeguards against family financial calamity benefited both the unfortunate and those in better circumstances by preserving broad-based stability and confidence in the future. That's what this is all about. And what the book does, it lays out those battles that I have fought, and as Elizabeth pointed out, we have fought and we have won in these fights. And that fight has been to strengthen and to expand the social safety net. I saw O'Donnell over there. OD, I'm called back to 1995, and in the chapter on defense of the hungry, we had Newt Gingrich. Listen, we had Newt Gingrich who said, let's block grant food stamps. Let's eliminate the school lunch program. Let's cut $270 billion from Medicare for taxes for the wealthy. Have we heard this before? Have we heard it before? Well, in the defense of the hungry, the fight was not only to preserve and protect the food stamps and nutrition programs, it was about expanding participation, raising the benefit level. And what we did in 95 is that, I went out and with Save the Children, I bought ties and scarves. Every member of our coalition, Tom is laughing, I went into the schmata business here. I was selling scarves and ties out of my office. So members got up on the floor with their tie that said Save the Children, or the women with their scarves, so that you remember that, Nita. Yes, you do. Because it was a fight. We put kids all around the Capitol to bring home the point that it was about our values. You weren't going to deny kids a school lunch. And, in 2008, we were able to increase in the Farm Bill the funding for the food stamp program. Ellen? And in 2009, we increased the funding for food stamps in the Economic Recovery Program. We can fight and we can win. And again, this is bipartisan. You think of this, and today it's not the case, but it was McGovern and it was Dole who went all over this country and who said we have a hunger problem in the United States of America. We are in the Congress, we can do something about it, and they did do something about it. And in the chapter that talks about in defense of children, the fight over the child tax credit, which I described. And the biggest obstacle has not been obstructionism or direct opposition, but indifference. Indifference to the condition of children, and particularly poor children in our country. And we made the fight, and again, in a bipartisan way. It was a J. Rockefeller. It was a George Miller. It was an Orrin Hatch. It was Newt Gingrich, others who proposed the child tax credit. And last year, after, Bill, 18 years, and in the tax bill, which I know the leader was not happy with me in voting for that tax bill because it wasn't paid for, but for the first time, we made the child tax credit permanent. And we're going to move. Speaking of the leader, leader, come on in, please. In defense of women, the fight for paycheck fairness. And again, we won that twice on the floor of the House with Democratic and Republican votes. First time around, 14 Republicans voted with us. Second time around, there were 10 folks, Republicans, who voted with us. I will recall this, and the leader, I think, will recall this short story, which is in the book. In a leadership meeting, I said to someone who I deeply admire and is a dear friend, and that's George Miller, who, when we were in the majority, he became the chair of the Education and Labor Committee. And he said, I said, George, when are we going to bring paycheck fairness, in the committee and the floor? And then he looked at me and he said, well, you don't have enough co-sponsors on the bill. You need to have co-sponsors. You get the co-sponsors, he says, we'll bring the bill up. And then to my left was the voice of Rahm Emanuel, who said to George, don't get the bitch mad. He said, don't get her mad. We got the co-sponsors that we needed. George brought it to the committee. He brought it to the floor. And as I said, we won twice. We lost in the Senate, and leader, because actually 2 women didn't vote for paycheck fairness. Olympia Snow and Susan Collins. It's in the book. It is in the book. Otherwise, it would be the law of the land today. There was a story about the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, and I was next to the leader when the president signed that bill, and they were handing pens back. That was an interesting set of circumstances with the pens and who the pens were going to. But then I got one, and I was about to pass it back, but she said to me, "Hold on to the pen. Hold on to the pen." So, it's a true story, true story. In defense of fair trade, fair trade, such a big part of my life over the last few years. And let me just read this to you if I can find it. I've got it here, so in my annotated book. Remember, though, it was the powerful campaign in and outside of the Congress that defeated TPP, and we must battle to ensure our values matter going forward. Trump seems more interested in contracting trade, but that is not our vision. We want to harvest the benefits of expanded trade to ensure that our citizenry, consumers, and workers, not just corporate interests or particular industries, are the primary beneficiaries. We now have the momentum to write the new rules of the road. Laurie, thank you very, very much. Thank you, and all the folks who worked. I see Bruce and everyone who worked here. In Chapter 6, there is about 2 women on the ticket, and again, leader, you remember this, not you for certain, because you're about increasing the numbers and multiplying, having women in most of the places, but that wasn't true of a lot of our colleagues, and I went to folks and asked for their support, because I was running for chair of the caucus, Nancy was running for whip, and quite frankly, I was told that we couldn't have 2 women on the ticket. But there again, no, that's okay. But listen, the good news is, and this is again in the book, I firmly believe that in my lifetime, we will be able to put an end to women being the cheaper option. Then we will finally be rid of the notion, once and for all, that 2 men on a ticket is normal, but 2 women is a tactical error. So there, anyway. I'm almost done, guys. I really am. I want to, the book, the chapter just before the ending of the book is about Paul Ryan. And I really want to read this because this is, I think all of us who are serving now or are witnessing to what is happening, I think you will concur. Paul Ryan's thinking about poverty. If you can only make receiving government aid onerous enough and humiliating enough, then people will opt out voluntarily and redouble their efforts to avoid hunger, illness, or being laid off. That idea is a slap in the face to the millions who do everything right and still cannot get by. It is a betrayal of a legacy of good government in the United States. This legacy is what I have worked to defend for 25 years. It is a vision for America that I want to expand so that all Americans can support one another in difficult times and share in prosperity. The final chapter and the conclusion reprises the success, as I said, of Democrats and Republicans coming together and understanding the value of the social safety net and how it has lifted people out of poverty. And there are policy directives in there. But what is so important for me, and that I was, and again, through the good offices of Leader Pelosi, I was part of the delegation that went to St. Peter's Square for the installation of Pope Francis in 2013. And I was there with so many of my Catholic colleagues, listening to his homily. And I felt a clarity and an optimism about that path forward. A clarity and an optimism that I hadn't experienced in a lot of years. And when Elizabeth spoke about Archbishop Whelan and his wanting to decertify my Catholic high school if I sat on the board because of my position on choice, when it came to the Affordable Care Act, one of the hardest things for me was my church that was about ready to tank the Affordable Care Act. It was in those last days that the misinformation campaign, and we said, how could that be? And Nancy shares that Catholic upbringing. How can it be that the rich fabric of this religion was about social justice and about the poor? And when you had Pope Leo XIII and talking about a system not called Social Security, but a system that said people and children and the elderly need to have protection. And that was in the 1890s. And Monsignor John Ryan sat by Franklin Roosevelt as he signed the Social Security Act. That we had moved so far from the basis of our faith and what we believed in. But the Pope restored that. His words were an affirmation that working to protect the poor and the vulnerable was a proper vocation, essential to a life lived to the fullest. He evoked St. Joseph, the protector of the Holy Family, and he called upon leaders in economic, political, and in social life to emulate him and how he exercised his role with unfailing presence and utter fidelity. The vocation of protector, Francis said, means protecting people, showing loving concern for each and every person, especially children, especially the elderly, those in need who are often the last we think about. It means building sincere friendships in which we protect one another in trust, respect, and goodness. And in the end, everything has been entrusted to our protection, and all of us are responsible for it. That is what it means to serve in the United States House of Representatives. That's what our job is. We have been entrusted with the lives of people who send us here to say, help me in the good times, but help me when I need a hand. That is the strength and the power of this institution. It doesn't do what we want it to do every day, but its potential is boundless. And it's up to us to push the edge of that envelope every single day, to be accountable for one another. It is a shared responsibility. It's a moral responsibility. It is the right thing for us to do. Thank you for giving me the opportunity of being there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I thank you all and for being here. But I'm so touched. that you know that Nancy Pelosi is going all over the country. She just back and forth, up and down, wherever it is, because she knows that the way we can turn things around is by getting back the House of Representatives. She is indefatigable in that effort. And I say a thank you. And in the book, Nancy, I don't know if you have read it yet, but it's not just about her place in history as the most effective Speaker of the House that we've had in this country. When she said no to breaking up the health care bill, she's responsible for that bill and passing the Affordable Care Act. But it is about the opportunity that, I'll speak personally, the opportunity that she has afforded me. You know, I sit on the Appropriations Committee, and when you go to a conference, they're usually not appropriators there. You are like an invasive species here. They don't want you there. But when it came to nutrition and hunger and food, Nancy Pelosi said, Rosa speaks for us. The Ag Bill, on the Ag Bill in the conference, she said, Rosa speaks for us. And she afforded me that opportunity to do that. You will read the stories on the child tax credit when she probably said, I don't want to hear from her one more time. And when she came into the room and she says, I'm sorry, I couldn't move them. I couldn't get rid of it was something like $8,500. So I was loaded for bear, you know what I am about. And she said, we got the threshold down to $3,000 so that millions of kids could make their way. She not only affords me that opportunity of participating. When you're looking and watching television today, you will see Elijah Cummings, you will see Adam Schiff, you will see Eric Swalwell, you will see Jan Schakowsky, you will see others who are making their voices heard on behalf of the Democratic Party. Nothing gives me greater pleasure in introducing to you our leader, the future Speaker, Nancy Pelosi.
I think, thank you, Rosa, for your very kind words, which I accept on behalf of all of our colleagues whose courage made so much of what we have done possible. I would say we had a perfect presentation, inspirational, visionary, pragmatic, political from Rosa, and that would be the appropriate end to this evening. But I do believe that any opportunity to talk about Rosa DeLauro is one that I cannot resist, again, on behalf of so many of my colleagues who are here. Let's give a wave, because some have come since that you maybe, Jerry, and Lois Frankel, and you already got these. Jan back there, Stacy, there's Pocan came. You can introduce him. Anyway, let's just say this. I'm not saying this for sports reasons. I'm saying it because it's what I want to talk about. I'm from San Francisco. Okay, let's hear it for the Golden State Warriors, okay? That wasn't my point, though. I never get enough of a response for the Golden State Warriors here. Anyway, I'm from San Francisco. Our patron saint is St. Francis. His song of St. Francis is our anthem. Make me the instrument of thy peace. You know the words. But something else he said is Rosa is the personification of. He said, preach the gospel, sometimes use words. And that's Rosa. She uses words too, but she is just a tireless, principled advocate, as she says, for the vulnerable, the least among us. And when she talks about these fights, I mean, really, I wish we could have had them all filmed at the time, going back to the 90s when she led the fight for a school lunch program, and then finally President Clinton took it up, and then it became, but she started it all. She started it. She persisted with it. She saw it to a very good place. But because she's relentless, persistent, and dissatisfied, it's just easier to say yes right from the start. Save yourself some time. But on this book, I'm holding up my own autographed copy, The Least Among Us, Waging the Battle for the Vulnerable. The Gospel of Matthew, The Least Among Us. People quote the Gospel of Matthew using words of what you do for the least of my brethren, you do for me. But actually, there's another interpretation of the Gospel of Matthew, and it says, what you didn't do for the least of my brethren, you didn't do for me. When I was hungry, you did not feed me. When I was homeless, you did not shelter me. When I was naked, you did not clothe me. When I was in prison, you did not visit me. And that's quite an indictment. But it's one that we can make very clearly on the opponents to the vulnerable that we talk about every day, challenge every day. And in the lead on all of that, Rosa owns this title because she owns these issues. She's a person who knows her purpose. She has a vision about a better America. She brings her, shall we say, Italian-American faith-based values to the fight. So she knows a vision of a better America means everyone is lifted up. She knows her subject matter. Don't ever get in a discussion. They send her over to the Senate any day of the week because she will know much more than anybody there, with all due respect to our friends in the Senate. She knows her subject matter. She knows what has worked, what hasn't worked, what the needs are, what the possibilities are, and she knows, third, vision, knowledge, how to get the job done. How to get the job done. She always has a plan. People say about Rose, oh, she works so hard. I said, you know what? How about she's a strategic thinker? She's a strategic thinker. How about she is an imaginative thinker, entrepreneurial almost in advancing new, fresh ideas about how to get the job done. Yeah, she works hard. They usually say that about women. Oh, she's a hard worker. Oh, really? And what about you? You work hard and you don't get anything accomplished the way Rosa gets things accomplished. And then, need I tell you this? The vision, the knowledge, the strategic thinking, the planner. She speaks from the heart, and she makes that heart-to-heart connection. You just have to succumb. You just have to agree, because her arguments are so knowledgeable, so visionary, so strategic, and so aimed to get the job done. So I know that I'm speaking a long time now, but I could talk all day about Rosa, and you probably think that I will. But it's really important to note that so many of the successes we have had, oh my gosh, fair pay, equal pay for equal work. I mean, I don't know, maybe we can write it down and 25 years later they can open up the box and we could tell the stories of what we were up against, really up against people who were out there preaching it, but not there voting it. So there's some challenges there because it wasn't their priority, even though it was something they supported. But with Rosa, if she went out there to fight it, it was her priority, and she had no holds barred in the fight for the vulnerable. And that's what our country's about. And it is those who are in the middle class and those who aspire to it. This American dream that her family experienced and that she knows firsthand means so much not only to those families but to our country. So it's wonderful to see so many colleagues here. I think more than we ever get even at a caucus on any given moment, and so many friends, so many progressives who are here. But when the other books are written about what has happened in Congress, I'm glad that Rosa put her record down. But the story could not be told without demonstrating very clearly the obvious and great leadership of Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Chairwoman Rosa DeLauro, Ranking Member Rosa DeLauro. Can you imagine when I said to the leadership in the Ag Committee, I know this is your committee, but Rosa's our leader on hunger. They knew better than to challenge that, because they knew she had a vision, she had her knowledge, she had a plan, and that she could connect with the American people on this subject. So on behalf of so many of our colleagues and people who can't even be here tonight, I thank Rosa DeLauro for making the difference in our country. And just this one thing, she talked about our church and our faith. They'd love us to leave, but we're not going, right, Rosa? We are not going. We are not going. But sometimes what I say to them is, you pray in church on Sunday, and then you pray on people the rest of the week. Can we take the E out of your praying and replace it with an A all week? Because that would be the honorable and consistent thing to do. But she spoke so beautifully about St. Francis, and that he talked about St. Joseph, and his swearing-in day was the Feast of St. Joseph, which we in the Italian-American community observe the way some people observe St. Patrick's Day, we observe St. Joseph's, both. But in any case, all of it coming back to faith-based respect for the dignity and worth of every person, believing that there's a spark of divinity in every person, and that we must respect that, and respect that spark that's in ourselves, and what it behooves us to do to honor the fact that we're all God's children. Nobody does that more or better than Rosa DeLauro, for the least among us. Thank you, Rosa.
Thank you. The next Speaker of the House of Representatives. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I only want to say there are a lot of staff here, present staff and former staff. Everyone in this room knows that there are no breakthroughs in policy without the work that you do. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to participate in these fights. Thank you. God bless you. Get a drink. Get some food. Thank you all very, very much for being here tonight. Thank you.